Hello, and welcome to How to Get Rid of Guilt. I want to share how this really came about because it was definitely a channeled, inspired message that came through, and I felt the need to really share this with you and let you know how me personally I've gone through the last few years without truly feeling the what I would call everyday guilt that comes up from the things that just happen to us on a regular basis based on really what is happening within society and how society says that we should be living. So I want to share that it started when I saw an Instagram post that you will see, it's right above this video, but I'm going to read it real quick. Because the first part where it says, "You're living life guilt-free from now on," as soon as I read it, I started nodding my head like, yes, I am living life guilt-free from now on. And I kept reading, and I looked at the different examples about deciding to have a cheat day, and you'll eat not with guilt but with satisfaction and things like that. And again, I remarked to myself, this is how I'm living. And I thought about, why aren't people living this way on a regular basis? Why am I different? What makes me, I don't want to say special, but what makes my life different that I'm not living on a sort of day-to-day feeling of guilt, whether it is with things like eating, working out, sleeping in later, things like that. Those things do not bring guilt to me. I don't feel guilt when those things happen. And as soon as I sort of asked the question, the answer just came. And it came very, I guess, what some people would call surreally. But for me, it really felt like a channeled message, and it was something that I was meant to share with the rest of the world as much as possible. So I wanted to do this video. There's also a workbook if you feel like you want to dive in deeper to it. And I'm not asking for anything in return for you watching the video and you getting some of this information and downloading the workbook, but I do ask that if you do it and you feel some sort of shift, that you email or message me and let me know, because I want to hear about it. I want to hear how it's impacted you and made a difference. And if you've also gotten something from it, that you just put your name in the mailing address below, your email and your name, so that you can join my newsletter, because I'll continue to share different things like this with anybody who's on my newsletter. Or down below, I think a little bit further, there's also a different free workbook. So if you wanted to get one additional thing, feel free to sign up in that way. So like I mentioned, my relationship with guilt has been very minimal over the last few years. Something that I've done to make sure that I don't feel guilt, because I started to realize that guilt and shame were very similar, but also that guilt drives us to make decisions through fear and to make us make decisions about things that we don't really want to do in life. We're saying yes to things that we really want to say no to. And a lot of the time that ends up leading, there's a path that leads to, and it's living a life that's not yours. It's living a life of depression sometimes. It's going down this path where you no longer feel like this is your life anymore, because you're not really making those decisions. You're making the decisions based on what won't make you feel guilty. However, there's a caveat to that, because if you do those things, a lot of the time what you end up feeling afterward is resentment for doing something you didn't really want to do, but instead you decided to choose not feeling guilty, which I'll get into a little bit more. So where does guilt come from? It comes from expectations. It comes from the idea of right and wrong, which that exists, but also it goes into bad versus good, which is subjective. And you can only judge bad versus good if you're in that situation and you're in it. And the other place that guilt comes from is from not feeling good enough. So a lot of the times we end up feeling this sort of what I call daily guilt, because we're not living up to either our or society's expectations, which makes us feel like we're not good enough. And that comes in a lot of different forms. If you're if you're on the workbook, if you downloaded the workbook, you'll see I put a few different ones. There's ones where in business, a lot of it comes from, I'm not doing the thing that so and so is doing. It's I feel guilty for not posting a certain way because I'm not getting clients this way. I feel guilty because I'm not as successful as I think I should be at this point in time. Um, there's a lot of different mom guilt that comes up too. I know I have a lot of mom friends who feel that. A lot of it is I'm not giving my child the attention that they need. I'm not feeding them the way that they need to. They're not getting all of the things that I feel like they need to get, or I'm not living up to the expectation of that Instagram mom who's doing all of these great things, and now I feel inadequate somehow, and you start to feel guilty that you're not doing the same thing for your children. It shows up with family and friends as well, and then on an everyday basis it shows up in things like what we eat, if we work out, how we work out, thinking that I need to lose weight or I need to eat a certain way to get this thing. So guilt is a form of self-rejection, because every time you feel guilt, you're rejecting yourself. You are saying yes again to like something else or someone else instead of saying yes to you and what you want. So that's a big part of it. And when you reject yourself, you feel guilty for not being or not doing more. Again, that comes up with the idea of this is who we think we should be, whether it's this type of mom, this type of business owner, this type of person, this type of daughter, this type of spouse. Like, it comes up in so many different areas, and we feel guilt when we're not living up to those expectations. And what it really boils down to is the word should, the things we think we should be doing. So with self-acceptance, once you start to accept yourself, you will allow yourself to be exactly where you're at, and the guilt starts to go away because you are so comfortable and you're so okay with where you're at. Still knowing that you're working on things and you're growing, but you fully accept yourself for where you're at instead of thinking that you need or should be somewhere else. So there's 3 pieces to what I would say and what I call how to get rid of guilt. And I try to simplify it as much as possible. I don't want this to be complicated or convoluted. And it is a starting point, and it's something that you're going to want to do consistently and work on all of the time, because guilt just shows up without you really realizing it. This is a muscle that I had to practice for a really long time. It's not something that you can just do overnight. You do once, you do this one magic thing, and then guilt goes away for forever. So I want to get into the 3 things. The first one is awareness. And the awareness is to be aware of when guilt is what you're actually feeling. So there are times where feelings pop up and you either don't recognize it as guilt in the moment, or it shows up as guilt later. So the best thing to do is to try to feel it in the moment. And again, that's something that you're going to want to work up to. It's not something that you might know right away. If you do, then that's amazing, because you're already on the first step and you're already working towards that, which means then you can start taking action. One of the best indicators, I think it's the number one indicator that I use all of the time. It's like whenever I hear this word, there's an alarm that goes off. It's like a ding, 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 ding. Every time I hear the word should, I immediately know that guilt is around the corner. Should is the guiding indicator that guilt is probably popping up. If not now, will later. So anytime you say the words, I should do this, I should be this, I should be here, be there, I should be something. Anytime you use the word should, guilt is right around the corner, ready to be like, hello, guess what? I'm right here. Because should means that you're not doing something or living up to some sort of expectation that either you have placed in your mind based on programming that's happened all throughout your childhood and up to your life until this point, or through learned patterns from your parents, from so many different people. So when you say the word should, that's the other piece, is where is that actually coming from? Where is this should happening? So you don't need to focus on that right away. it's really recognizing anytime you say the word should, whether it's something as simple as I should go get the mail out of the mailbox, or I should make my bed. Like, those are very small things. But every time you say I should, there's this expectation that you feel like you're not living up to. And again, it's subconsciously the message is therefore I'm not good enough. So I should do this because if I don't, then I'm not good enough. I'm not whatever it is enough. So it's just getting to the point of it saying I'm not enough, which then leads to the guilt of feeling guilty because you're not living up to that expectation. So should is your guiding word. It is the best indicator at this point to recognize when guilt might be showing up in your life. The second piece is elimination. So both the actual actions and the use of the word should. So anything that you feel like you should be doing needs to be eliminated. Using the word should needs to be eliminated. And the reason why is because then you'll actually start to come from more inspired action and intention, true intention of something that you genuinely want or need to do versus thinking that it's something that you just should do, because that means that it's based on somebody else's expectation and not your own. And recognizing that when it is your own, to still question whether or not it's coming from you or coming from the programming and the conditioning that you've been through as a child and up until this point. So I want to give an example of how you want to eliminate the word should, because we use it so often. And it kind of goes into the third piece a little bit. So we'll get there too. So the example is I recently, I have a weekly call with women that I'm in a coaching group, a sister circle with, and we support and help each other, and we celebrate with each other all of the time. So I was feeling extremely tired and I needed extra rest. My body was telling me you need to rest. And I had this call coming up, and I could either say yes to the call and then later potentially feel like I gave too much, I did something for other people, and what I really needed in the moment, what my body was telling me, was that I needed rest. So I either say yes to them or I say yes to myself. And they're not going to make that decision for me. So I said yes to myself, and I canceled the call from my end, which they could still meet for and they could still receive support, and offered support on a different day when I didn't need that extra time for myself. So because I gave that to myself, the rest of the day actually ended up going really well. I wasn't tired the rest of the day. I ended up giving my best as a result of not thinking I should go to this thing because I say that I'm going to, but also knowing that my body isn't wanting to do that right now. If I do that, I'm pushing myself past a limit. That means the rest of the day, I'm not going to show up in my best self. So the other question that happens when you think about eliminating a should is, am I showing up the best I can for myself and others? But first, it's myself, because you can't show up for others unless you're showing up for yourself first. So for, in my case, in that example, I needed to give myself that rest in order to show up for them at a better time, and in a better way. Because if I was on the call, I might have just been sitting there like, I need to go to sleep. I'm not paying attention. I'm not listening. I don't feel like supporting. And I'm not showing up in a way that's, in integrity with myself also. So you need to figure out a way that makes sense for you of the things that you need and want, instead of just the things that you should be doing. Yeah, you should get out of bed, but guess what? If your body is telling you you need some extra rest, why would you listen to the should? Who is that for? Because it's not for you. So when you eliminate, you want to eliminate the shoulds of the actions and the use of the word should. In the number 3, I'm going to tell you what to replace it with. And the other thing to ask yourself is, am I showing up the best I can for myself and others? That's how you'll know whether or not eliminating a should from your life makes sense. So the third piece is replacement. So if we get rid of should, what do we replace it with? Because we're still prone to saying that word, we're still prone to thinking in that way, but we can shift it a little bit. And there's so much power in the use of our words and the way that we say things. So instead of thinking or saying that I should do something, or I should be this, turn it into either I want or I need. Because should is considered an obligation, but it's an obligation outside of yourself that's not yours. It's an obligation and an expectation from others. A need is directly for you. It might still be an obligation, but it's directly for you rather than for everyone else. So using it as I want or I need. So an example is, there are times where I'm just sort of in my own zone, not wanting to do a lot of the errands and the things that I feel like need to happen in order for me to, be at my best. One in particular is every once in a while I don't want to go to the grocery store when I say I'm going to go to the grocery store. But I'm not going to sit there and say, I should really go to the grocery store. If I don't, it's not going to be good. And I sit there and that's when guilt starts to come in, even if it doesn't sort of feel like that right at first. That's where guilt is coming from. But if I turn it into, I need to go to the grocery store because I know that when I have food to make, instead of, when I get hungry and there's nothing here and then I get hangry because I don't know what I want and have to decide, and there's so much energy that goes into it when I don't have food here. It's a need, not a should. So if I change the shoulds that are truly obligations for me, if I change those into needs, then it's a lot easier for me to say that I'm going to actually do it then. Because when I say I should, there's also this false indicator of, if I don't do it, I'm somehow bad. I'm somehow a bad person if I don't do the thing that I should do. But if I say I need to, then I'm showing up for myself when I go and I do it. I'm not showing up for others only. I hope that makes sense. Because that's a really big piece to this, is how you shift the language and how you shift the action towards it. It becomes less about the things that you also think you need to do. So once you start using I need and I want, you start to realize the things that you actually need to do in life versus the things that you think you should do, and use the word I need to. So your obligations become much more clear as to things that are imposed on you by society, or things you genuinely need to do for yourself and for your survival and for, the optimal output of yourself. The other piece that was on the Instagram post that I thought was extremely important was pleasure over pressure. And I thought that was so important too, because we put pressure on ourselves to be a certain way, which is where our shoulds come up from. But if we come from pleasure, which is genuinely, I want to do something. I want to post this Instagram post. I want to make food from scratch for my child. I want to do these other things. Like, I want to work out. I want to make myself a healthy meal because I feel so good. It becomes pleasureful instead of pressure on, I should make this healthy meal because if I don't, I will look this way, which isn't society's norm of what beautiful looks like. It goes down this huge rabbit hole when it becomes the should. So if it's from a place of pleasure, of things you genuinely want to do for yourself, then there isn't pressure on yourself anymore either. And to be honest, whose pressure is it? Is it really yours? Or is it from the conditioning and this idea of we need to live a certain way and be a certain way in order to survive in society? That's a big piece of, it's like all of the things that I talk about when I talk about unsettling yourself. It's not giving into these norms, if you want to call them that, this conditioning that life has to be this one way, and that if we're not doing that, we should feel guilty. There's no reason to feel guilty for living your life in a way that makes sense to you. It doesn't need to make sense to anybody else. So those are the big pieces. The other part of replacement is because this idea that we're not enough when we don't follow the shoulds that we put on ourselves, if we replace it with I want or I need, we also end up asking ourselves, what is best for me at the moment? So there's no I should do this. It's what is best for me right now. And then you go from based on what's best for me, I want to do this or I need to do this. And then that'll start to shift. And you'll start to have more acceptance because you realize also that what is best for you is the best possible choice you can make. And if you're making the best possible choice with what you have, how could you not accept that? How could you think that you're not enough? You are literally choosing the best possible option that makes you more than enough. And that should eliminate and get rid of the guilt that you feel when you come from the place of I should be doing this or I should be doing that. There's so much power in your words and not using the word should, and instead replacing it with I need or I want. Using should, so gonna recap real quick with the three pieces. One being awareness, which is awareness of when you use the word should, and that guilt is most likely around the corner when you do. Eliminating the shoulds, whether it's the action itself or the word. And number three, replacing it with I need or I want, and realizing that it's the best possible thing for you to do for yourself. I want to say one more thing about guilt. You should never feel guilty for making the best possible choice for yourself. The idea is that you might make the wrong choice. This is where I talked about right and wrong and good and bad at the beginning. You feel guilty because you think you might make the wrong choice. If you are coming from your best and you're making the best possible choice for you, it's never going to be the wrong choice, and there should never be any guilt around making that decision based on the information that you had in the best possible way that you had. So I want to remind you of that. If you want to dig in deeper into your own guilt and you really want to unpack this, then we can work together. You can schedule a free call and we can see how that'll work. If you are good with this, then that is amazing. I hope you got so much out of it, and I hope this truly works for you and you can start to see a shift in how guilt is showing up and starting to feel it a lot less. The goal at first is to reduce it. It's not to eliminate it completely. But if you continue to work on these pieces and you recognize when it's showing up in your own life and to eliminate it and to replace it, those are the three things, then you really will see a long-term shift and you truly will get rid of it. You will only feel guilty when there's actual guilt, and also you realize, again, you did the best with what you had and you moved on from that. You made the best possible choice you could at the moment and you moved on from it. So I want to remind you of that piece as well. And if you ever need that reminder, feel free to reach out. You can email me, you can find me on Instagram. And I truly hope that you got as much out of this as I have over the last few years, and that you are able to get rid of the guilt and you stop feeling that way. So, thank you.